Hello everybody and welcome back to Big Dan's channel. I am, of course, as always, Big Dan, and today I'm going to be discussing Markiplier's directorial debut film, Iron Lung. So, first off, just to get this out the way, the film, I did enjoy it, but it is not as good as I thought it was going to be, if I'm to be completely honest about this. Just because when I went into it, I was expecting to give it like an easy 4.5 stars, just because I thought the trailer looked pretty good, and just obviously I have to be as unbiased as possible, with YouTuber films, especially with it being, one I've watched for like 8 years now, I want to say something like that. So obviously you have to be, as unbiased as possible when it comes to these kind of films. And unfortunately it's enjoyable enough, but it just wasn't like great or like had me thinking like, wow, this is brilliant, one of the best films of the year. Unfortunately, that was just kind of the way the cards fell in this one. One of the big problems I have with the film is just the overall first half of it is way too slow and dull, if I'm going to be completely honest, and it just feels like a lot of nothing's kind of happening, if that makes sense, except for maybe like a few key parts. And yeah, it just felt pretty dull and repetitive, for lack of better phrasing or anything like that. Like there was just not much really going on there. And as well as that, just Mark as the convict, as he's known within the film, just doesn't feel like a very compelling character. Like I know this is obviously based off the video game Iron Lung, which I think came out 2022 if I remember correct, but it was just part of the problem was where it didn't really like give much exposition about him. Like there was little bits of it where they tried adding, I think, their own like lore of the story, and that's fine, and I can get why they, obviously when it comes to a video game adapted film, there are going to be changes, and I totally understand that. But it was just part of the issue that I had with that is that they don't really develop that backstory nearly enough. It's like surface level at best. I will say a positive. The second half of it and the like third act in particular, like the last act of the film, is actually quite good, and genuinely, like as soon as the second half started, I was like, okay, you know what, this is genuinely starting to turn into a pretty decent film. But just the ending of it is way too dark, and I mean that in a literal sense, not like tonally. I mean like literally, the screen is actually too darkly lit. Because a few of my friends were there as well, and were saying afterwards that for the life of us, we could not tell what was going on in that ending. And I don't think it was intentional. I mean, if it was, then fair enough, but it just didn't work for us. But yeah, the is genuinely, I had no idea what was going on in those like last maybe 2 or 3 minutes, I want to say, which might not sound like a lot, but when you're watching a film in the middle of a cinema screen, it does translate into a fair amount of the screen time. But to go into the positives a bit more, as I said, because obviously this film, I did still enjoy it, and I said it was an enjoyable film. Those are all the negatives I had. To be fair, the film's biggest strong point probably has to be the cinematography. Just while I was watching it, while it's not like, best Oscar for cinematography or anything like that, I would say that the camera work of the film has to be probably some of the best I've seen the past few years. And it is genuinely just so appealing to look at and witness. Like the overall camera work, as I say, is just so spot on and all that. And I did pick up on that very quickly. And I know a lot of people said the same thing, my friends included, when I went to go see this. And on top of that, as I said, the third act and second half of the film is pretty good, and it does pick up quite a bit there as well. Mark's acting as well, because part of something you need to know about this film, I'd say for maybe about 90% of the runtime, give or take, 90% of this film is Markiplier on screen, as you kind of do expect. And when you're watching him on screen, because obviously, he's going to be, the main performance you're focused on if he's like 90% of the film, then he does do quite a good job at it. I nearly said for a YouTuber, but to be fair, that would be pretty harsh. I mean, anyone can be a good actor just as long as you've, got the right talent for it. And his acting genuinely, like putting aside the fact that he's, an old YouTuber I've watched for years, his acting is actually fairly decent. Again, not best Oscar like for acting or anything like that, but his acting is genuinely pretty decent in this film, and I did actually find him quite, well performance, and you can tell the passion's gone into this film, especially, well, what I mean, especially, like considering this film's like got a budget of less than 3 million, and as of me recording this, and this is like literally the Sunday, so the film only came out 2 days ago, and I remember checking yesterday and it had already beaten its budget. So I am glad to see the film doing overall relatively successful. And as I was going to say, the last fact that I have to add in for the film is that the production design and the visuals that are on screen are genuinely pretty nice. And even if you didn't like this film, which I do get, like, it's not going to be for everyone. I have to admit, I did watch Penguin Zero's video on this. That is kind of taken from his, but I do agree with him. Like, this isn't going to be a film for everyone that everyone's going to like love and, you know, cack their pants over or anything like that and say it's the best horror of all time, which obviously it's not. I'm not saying it is, but for me it did relatively work, even though it does seem to be becoming a little bit divisive, at least based off the reviews I've seen. But yeah, what can I say? I did find the film relatively enjoyable. As I said, wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be, unfortunately, but it was just kind of the way the cookie crumbled with this one. So, for all the reasons I've just listed there, my final verdict for Iron Lung is a 7 out of 10. As I said, cinematography, production design, acting from Mark in particular, and the second half and the third act are definitely where this film shines. Yes, it does have its flaws, being, of course, as I said, that the first half is way too dull and repetitive. The ending you can't say for the life of you, and there's not really that much backstory added, which I would have liked more of. But it's not quite enough to make me think like, oh, this is a mid film or something like that. You know, I can see films coming out this year. I'm not going to name any, but films that come out this year, I can see being like just mediocre, and just when I envision them, it just doesn't feel like this film would exactly fit that category, which is why I went with the 7 out of 10 or 3.5 stars if you use a kind of star rating system. So yeah, those are my reasons for enjoying the film. As always, I hope you guys have liked this review. If you did, please press like, subscribe if you want to see me other reviews and the other kinds of content that I make. Thank you for watching as always, and I've been Big Dan, and I'm out. Peace.